Hi, my name is Emma Stern. This is my video response to Needs and Challenges of Disaster for Counseling 6323, Crisis Response and Trauma Care. First, the challenges of the heroic stage. So initially, many people will deny the impact of the disaster. They deny this impact on their homes, on their family, and on themselves. Additionally, people will utilize extraordinary measures to protect their homes and families, as well as stockpile community assets. Also, burnout can be a challenge of the heroic stage. This can happen from lack of self-care. Lastly, a lack of long-term views, which can be a challenge of the heroic stage. But also a coping mechanism for many people. This also ties into denying the impact of the disaster. Both denying the impact and the lack of long-term views can also be something that's sort of a positive in the face of a disaster, as it allows for people to keep going even after experiencing such a traumatic event. Next, the needs of the heroic stage. So it's important to develop self-care practices in the heroic stage in order to avoid burnout later on and to be able to keep administering care to others. Additionally, establishing community relations before disaster strikes can be very important. This will also help to avoid burnout, as resources from other areas are being implemented. Additionally, response to the community impacted is also a big need of the heroic stage, which is just addressing safety of survivors, addressing basic needs of survivors, food, water, shelter, clothing, etc. And then also praying for and with survivors can be very important and very powerful in providing some comfort during this stage. Okay, so the next stage is the honeymoon stage. And during this stage, many people can experience unrealistic feelings. This can include great gratitude, focusing on everything, that everything is going to be okay, and focusing on feel-good stories, and the idea that normalcy is possible. During this stage, people can experience a crash point. This crash point is when individuals become exhausted and worn out from the heroic phase. And this can happen once the reality of the disaster sets in, when people start to really process what happened and, the reality of the impact on their community, on themselves, on their home, their families, on their friends, and, a lot of other aspects of the disaster. Okay, so who is at risk during the crash point, or to experience a crash point in the honeymoon stage? So this can happen to anyone affected by the disaster, staff members treating survivors, people in the community helping others, older people and younger people. They're at a greater risk for health complications, which can trigger a crash point, and also they're also at a greater risk for physical ailments, which can also cause a crash point. Okay, so why does this crash point occur in the honeymoon stage? So this can occur because of burnout or, experiencing something traumatic as well. And this can occur because of lack of self-care, just the sheer amount of victims or survivors, and the limited amount of resources that can occur after a disaster. Also, traumatic experiences setting into reality. So people are really starting to let those experiences settle in and are starting to try and process that. And that can lead to a crash point. So, and also, childhood trauma resurfacing as the result of experiencing a disaster. And there's also a lot of other things that can cause a crash point in the honeymoon stage. Okay, so interventions for the crash point in the honeymoon stage. So fundraising, surveying and assessing people for things like PTSD, and then also making those referrals to mental health professionals, and additionally making plans for long-term recovery and really focusing in on that long-term plan, as many people are just starting to really think about that as the denial kind of fades away. And then also looking from the Christian perspective or the church perspective, providing Bible studies aimed at healing trauma, and additionally support groups and things like that where the community is involved and others are involved. Okay, so next is the disillusionment stage. So in this stage, many people are experiencing hopelessness, feeling abandoned, as there's less outside help, as nonprofit organizations kind of start to fade out, and people also experience fear about financial future, helplessness, anger, sense of futility, so just not feeling like there's any really point to it after experiencing such a grave disaster. And these reactions and experiences can cause maladaptive coping skills such as drinking, gambling, relationship struggles, addictions, whether it starts an addiction or causes a relapse, violence to others, and domestic violence. And additionally, people can experience PTSD, anxiety and depression, or also people are at a higher risk for suicide. And it's important to note that these reactions and these clinical conditions aren't just within a couple days or a couple weeks or even a couple months of the initial disaster, but these can also occur for up to, a few years down the line. So people can still be feeling those effects of this traumatic experience for a long time, and it's important to provide assistance and help in those situations to start the healing process. Okay, so when talking about the healing process or treatment and interventions in the disillusionment stage, it's important to provide support and services to victims or survivors as nonprofits lessen their involvement. So as nonprofits start to fade, it's important for community organizations or community churches to provide assistance to people in the community. So churches can provide hope and healing through Christ, and church involvement just in the community through providing food or like a meal to those in need, providing clothing, recreation or stress relief, home repair, along with a lot of other things that could foster involvement in the community. And this is also important from a Christian perspective, as this kind of fosters the openness to Christ that many people experience and feel following a disaster situation. So Additionally, providing specific community health mental training is important. This is important to educate and normalize reactions to disaster and to debrief about the disaster. So, from the church perspective, providing a debrief about long-term goals and what the long-term will look like after a disaster to members can be really important. Additionally, encouraging people to utilize mental health services and encouraging community versus isolation. So keeping people from going into isolation and providing that community support. And lastly, focusing on burnout prevention is important, especially for those still providing direct services. Lastly, I have included the following resource in my response. This is Needs and Challenges of Disaster, a video on YouTube, published April 23rd, 2019, with Jennifer Cisney and Michelle Louviere at HCU Online Course Development. Thank you.